Nobody ever looked twice at the girl crawling out of ventilation shafts. That was fine with Nadia Orloff. She preferred it that way. Grease on her elbows, coolant fluid dripping from her sleeves, and a wrench between her teeth. That was her world. The narrow, dark tunnels inside Orivar Station where pipes leaked and circuits sparked and nobody important ever bothered to go. She pulled herself out of Shaft 7C and sat on the metal floor for a moment, catching her breath. Her left leg ached. It always ached. A childhood fall back on Earth had left her with a limp that never quite healed, and crawling through tight spaces for 8 hours made it worse. She stretched it out and winced at a sound made her look up. Boots. Heavy ones. 4 sets of them, clicking against the corridor floor in perfect rhythm. Drashin cadets. She recognized them immediately. 7 feet tall, scaled skin like polished stone, built like war machines given legs. They were the pride of the galaxy. Every species knew it. The Drashin were the strongest, the fastest, the most feared warriors in known space. Their leader stopped when he saw her. Goran. She knew his name because everyone on the station knew his name. He was the top cadet in the military academy, destined for command before his 30th cycle. He looked down at her sitting on the floor with grease on her face and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh exactly. It was worse. It was the laugh of someone who found something so small and so unimportant that it was genuinely amusing. Look, he said to his squad. The humans send their broken ones to clean their pipes. His squad laughed. They walked on. Their boots clicked away down the corridor, and the sound faded, and Nadia was alone again. She stood up. She logged the repair on her datapad. She moved on to the next job. This was life on Orivar Station, a massive deep space trading hub where dozens of alien species lived and worked and argued and occasionally fought. The station was governed by a council of species. The Drashin held the highest seats because strength determined rank and nobody was stronger. The Fenari, tall, graceful insectoids with wings like stained glass, served as diplomats. The Malek, heavy amphibians with eyes like black marbles, controlled trade. And the humans? Humans had no council seat. Humans were new to the galaxy. Humans fixed pipes and hauled cargo and stayed out of the way. Nadia had been on the station for 2 years. In that time, she had filed 43 maintenance reports flagging safety hazards. 39 had been ignored. She had repaired 612 systems that nobody thanked her for. She had eaten alone in the lower deck cafeteria every single night. She did not complain. Complaining required someone to listen, and nobody listened to maintenance workers. She was in the middle of replacing a corroded pressure valve on Deck 9 when the alarm hit. Not a standard alarm. The deep, bone-rattling pulse that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. Red light flooded every corridor. Every screen on the station switched to the emergency channel that a cargo freighter carrying 12 unstable plasma cores had lost navigation control. It was drifting into the station's outer docking ring, tumbling end over end in a wild spin. If it hit the ring, the plasma cores would rupture. The entire eastern quarter of the station would be destroyed. 40,000 people lived in the eastern quarter. Nadia found a maintenance console and pulled up the tactical feed. She could see the freighter on screen, spinning like a drunk dancer, getting closer with every rotation. On the command deck far above her, the Drashin military commanders were already launching an intercept team. Fighter craft screamed out of the hangar bay and curved toward the freighter in tight formation. Nadia watched them approach. She watched the freighter spin, and she saw something. The spin was not random. It looked random if you watched it for 10 seconds. But Nadia had spent 2 years watching machines move. She understood rotation and torque and momentum the way most people understood breathing. The freighter's tumble had a pattern. Every 47 seconds, there was a pause. A tiny hesitation in the spin where the freighter's port side faced the station for almost 3 full seconds before the rotation resumed. A gap. A window. Something you could use. She opened a comm channel to the operations center. This is Maintenance Technician Orloff on Deck 9. The freighter's rotation has a 47-second cycle with a 3-second pause on the port side. You can use that window for approach. Static. Then a voice. This channel is for authorized personnel. Clear the line. The channel cut off. Nadia tried again. Same result. She tried a third time and was told that if she contacted operations again, she would be written up for interference during an emergency. On the tactical feed, the Drashin fighters closed in on the freighter. They moved in standard formation, fast and aggressive, the way Drashin always moved. They did not know about the 47-second gap. They were trying to match the freighter's spin and grab on. It was not going to work. Nadia could see it in the numbers. The tumble rate was too fast for a direct approach. The fighters would get caught in the rotation and smashed against the hull. She closed the comm channel. She closed the tactical feed. She stood up from the console and started walking. Not toward the command deck. She already knew they would not listen. She walked toward Deck 14, toward the secondary engineering console that controlled the station's external tether arms. 6 magnetic grapple systems designed for guiding small cargo pods into the docking ring. She had maintained those arms for 2 years. She knew every bolt, every wire, every tolerance rating. Nobody had asked for her help. Nobody wanted it. That had never stopped her before. The explosion lit up the tactical feeds across every deck. One of the Drashin fighters had clipped the freighter's spinning hull. The craft shattered on impact, and the pilot ejected half a second before the fireball swallowed the cockpit. Emergency teams scrambled to retrieve the pilot's escape pod, but the real damage was already done. The collision had destabilized 2 of the 12 plasma cores inside the freighter. They were now leaking radiation, and the containment timers were dropping fast. Nadia did not watch the explosion. She was already on Deck 14, standing in front of a console that most people on the station did not even know existed. The secondary engineering terminal. It controlled the 6 external tether arms mounted along the docking ring's outer frame. Magnetic grapple systems. Simple machines designed to catch cargo pods drifting in from supply ships and guide them gently into the loading bays. They had never been used on anything bigger than a standard supply crate. The freighter out there was 600 times heavier than a crate. Nadia pulled up the tether arm diagnostics. All 6 arms were online. She had serviced them 4 months ago. Replaced the magnetic coils on arms 2 and 5. Recalibrated the extension motors on arm 6. She knew their limits better than the engineers who had designed them. She ran the math. The freighter's mass, the rotational speed, the force required to slow the spin, the tensile strength of each arm. The numbers came back ugly. A single arm trying to catch the freighter would snap like a twig. 2 arms would last maybe 5 seconds. All 6 at once would hold longer, but the stress would tear them from their mountings within 20 seconds. But Nadia was not thinking about catching the freighter with brute force. She was thinking about rhythm. 47 seconds. 3-second window. The freighter's port side facing the station for just long enough to make contact. What if she did not try to stop the spin all at once? What if she pulsed the magnetic field across the arms in sequence? Arm 1 catches and holds for 3 seconds, then releases and passes the load to Arm 2. Arm 2 holds, then passes to Arm 3. A wave. A rolling catch that distributes the force across time instead of concentrating it in one moment. It was insane. The timing would have to be perfect. A half-second delay on any arm transfer would buckle the whole system. Nadia started programming the sequence that a door opened behind her. She turned and saw a Fenari standing in the entrance. Tall, thin, wings folded against his back, compound eyes reflecting the blue light of the console screens. Sereth. She recognized him from the diplomatic wing. He was one of the senior Fenari representatives on the council. The tether arms activated on my security feed, he said. His voice was soft, layered like wind through leaves. You are the one moving them. It was not a question. Yes, Nadia said. She did not have time to explain. She did not have time to be afraid of a council member finding her accessing restricted systems. The intercept team can't match the freighter's spin. They already lost a fighter. But the freighter has a 47-second rotation cycle with a 3-second pause. I can use the tether arms to catch it during the pause and slow the spin with sequential magnetic pulses. Sereth stared at her. Fenari faces were hard to read. Their compound eyes did not narrow or widen the way human eyes did. But something shifted in his posture. His wings lifted slightly, which Nadia had learned meant interest. "The tether arms are rated for cargo pods," he said. "I know. The freighter weighs 600 times more than a cargo pod." "I know. And you believe this will work?" Nadia paused. She looked at the numbers on her screen. "I believe it has a better chance of working than sending more fighters into a spin they can't match. And those plasma cores are leaking. If we wait much longer, it won't matter what we try." Sareth looked at the screen for a long time. Fenari processed information differently than humans. They saw patterns in data the way humans saw colors. Whatever he saw in Nadia's calculations, it was enough that he walked to the console beside hers and entered his diplomatic authorization code. Security lockouts on the tether system dissolved. Full control transferred to Nadia's terminal. "You have one attempt," he said. "If the arms fail, the debris will accelerate the freighter's drift. The impact window will shrink from hours to minutes." "I understand," Nadia said. "Then proceed." Nadia turned back to her console. Her hands are not shaking. People always expected hands to shake in moments like this, but hers were steady. They had always been steady. Shaky hands could not repair pressure valves in zero-gravity crawlspaces. Shaky hands could not replace magnetic coils while balanced on a maintenance ladder 40 stories above the station's reactor floor. She activated the sequence. On the external cameras, the 6 tether arms began to extend from the docking ring like fingers reaching into the dark. Up on the command deck, every officer in the room saw the arms moving. Alarms triggered. Voices rose. Someone demanded to know who had activated the grapple system during a crisis. The Drashin commander, Halldeck, ordered an immediate shutdown. Sareth opened a comm channel from Deck 14. His voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "I authorize the activation," he said calmly. "I suggest you watch." The command deck went quiet. Nadia counted in her head. 47 seconds. The freighter spun. The tether arms waited. The plasma cores leaked. And 12,000 people in the eastern quarter held their breath without knowing why. 39. 40. 41. Nadia's finger hovered over the firing command. 45. 46. The freighter's port side swung toward the station. 47. She fired arm 1. The magnetic grapple struck the freighter's port hull with a sound that traveled through the station's frame like a drumbeat. Nadia felt it in her teeth. On the external cameras, arm 1 locked on, and the cable went tight instantly. The tension meter on her console spiked into the red point 3 seconds. That was all she had before the freighter's rotation dragged the arm past its tolerance point 1. The arm groaned, metal screaming against metal point 2. She killed the magnetic pulse on arm 1 and fired arm 2. The load transferred. Arm 1 went slack. Arm 2 caught the freighter's momentum mid-swing and held. The command deck was watching. Every tactical screen on the station was showing the same feed. 6 tether arms. 1 spinning freighter. 1 human life sign on deck 14.3 seconds on arm 2. Nadia transferred to arm 3. The rhythm was everything. Too early and the load would snap back. Too late and the arm would tear free from its mounting. She had to hit the transfer at exactly the right moment, when the freighter's momentum was at its lowest point between rotation cycles. Arm 3 caught. Held. The freighter's spin was slowing. Not by much, maybe 2 degrees per second, but it was slowing. Arm 4. The grapple fired and missed. The magnetic lock did not engage properly. Nadia felt her stomach drop. She had 0.8 seconds to make a decision. She skipped arm 4 entirely and fired arm 5. The gap in the sequence sent a shudder through the entire tether system. Arm 3 buckled slightly, taking extra load it was not supposed to carry. Nadia held her breath. Arm 5 locked on. The shudder settled. She exhaled. Arm 6. The last one. She fired it, and the magnetic grapple caught the freighter on the underside of the hull. Now 5 arms were connected. The freighter's spin had dropped from its original speed to roughly a third. Still dangerous. Still too fast for docking teams. But manageable. Nadia did something that no one on the command deck expected. She reprogrammed arm 4 on the fly. The magnetic coil that had failed to lock was misaligned by less than 2 degrees. She adjusted the targeting parameters and fired it again. It caught .6 arms. All locked. All holding. She took a breath. Then she sent a simultaneous full-power pulse through all 6 arms at once. The tether system was never designed for this. The power draw alone triggered brownout warnings across 3 decks. Lights flickered in the corridors. The station's reactor automatically compensated, dumping extra power into the grid. The freighter stopped spinning. It just stopped. It hung in the void outside the docking ring, held by 6 arms that were shaking with strain, cables stretched to their absolute limit, magnetic coils running so hot that the external cameras showed them glowing faint orange. But it was still, motionless, dead in space. On the command deck, nobody spoke. Emergency docking teams launched within seconds. They reached the freighter, cut through the airlock, and began securing the 12 plasma cores one by one. The 2 leaking cores were stabilized with portable containment fields. The others were locked down in their housings. It took 4 hours. During those 4 hours, Nadia sat at her console on Deck 14 and monitored the tether arms. She adjusted magnetic field strength 11 times to compensate for the freighter shifting as teams moved inside it. She rerouted power from 3 auxiliary systems to keep the coils from overheating. She did not eat. She did not stand up. She did not leave the console for a single second. When the last plasma core was secured and the freighter was towed safely into a holding bay, the Eastern Quarter evacuation order was lifted. 12,000 people went home. Nadia ran a full diagnostic on all 6 tether arms. Arms 1 and 3 had stress fractures in their extension motors. Arm 4's magnetic coil was burned out from the second firing. Arm 6 had a hairline crack in its mounting bracket. She logged all of it into the maintenance system. Repair requests. Priority level 2. Estimated time to fix. 3 days. She saved the report. She closed the console. She stood up, and her left leg nearly gave out from sitting in the same position for 4 hours. She grabbed the edge of the console and steadied herself. Then she walked, limping, back to her quarters on Deck 6 as she passed through corridors full of people. Some were crying with relief. Some were hugging. A Malak trader was sitting on the floor with his head in his hands, shaking. A Fenari family was gathered near a viewport, their wings trembling as they watched emergency lights flash outside. Nobody looked at Nadia. She was just another maintenance worker in a grease-stained jumpsuit, limping through the crowd. She reached her quarters. A small room. A bed, a desk, a closet. No declarations. She sat on the bed, pulled off her boots, and lay down. She was asleep in 30 seconds. She dreamed about the 47-second gap. In the dream, the gap was a door, and she walked through it into a room full of light, and on the other side, someone was waiting who actually listened when she spoke. She woke up 6 hours later to a sound at her door. A chime. She got up, limped to the door, and opened it. There was no one there, just a small digital card on the floor. She picked it up and read IT. IT was a formal summons. The Council of Species requested the presence of Maintenance Technician Nadia Orlov in the Grand Chamber at 0900 station time. Not the Human Delegation Office. Not the Maintenance Supervisor's desk. The Grand Chamber, where the leaders of 42 species sat and decided the fate of the galaxy. Nadia read it twice. Then she went to find her cleanest jumpsuit. IT was still stained. The Grand Chamber smelled like old stone and ozone. Nadia had never been inside it before. Maintenance workers did not get invited to the places where history was made. They got invited to the places where the plumbing broke. The room was enormous. 42 tiered rows curved upward from a central floor like the inside of a bowl turned on its side. Each row held the representatives of a different species. The Drashin sat at the highest tier, their scaled bodies gleaming under white light. Goran stood behind his commander, Haldeck, arms crossed, jaw tight. The Fenari occupied the middle rows, their wings folded neatly. Sareth sat among them, his compound eyes fixed on Nadia as she walked in. The Malak filled the lower tiers, their wet skin glistening, their black eyes blinking slowly. And there on the central floor, standing alone in a stained maintenance jumpsuit with a limp in her left leg, was Nadia. She had never felt smaller in her life. Haldeck spoke first. He was old for a Drashin. Scars ran across his face like a map of wars fought and won. His voice filled the chamber without effort. This human accessed restricted station systems during an active emergency. She bypassed command authority. She operated equipment without military clearance. She endangered the station by activating tether arms on a target they were never rated to handle. He paused. I recommend immediate confinement and transfer to Earth. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several species nodded. The rules were clear. Unauthorized access to critical systems during an emergency was a serious offense. Nadia stood still. She did not argue. She did not look away. Sareth stood. The chamber quieted. Fenari diplomats carried weight in this room, not because of strength, but because they were the ones who kept the other species from tearing each other apart. I would like to present data, Sareth said. He activated a holographic display in the center of the floor. Numbers appeared. Trajectory calculations. Load distribution formulas. Timing sequences down to the millisecond. The math behind Nadia's tether arm maneuver, laid out in perfect clarity. This is what Technician Orloff calculated in approximately 4 minutes, Sareth said. Alone, on a maintenance console, without assistance. He let that sit for a moment. Now, the intercept team, he continued. New data appeared. The Drashin fighter approach, the collision, the pilot's ejection, the destabilization of 2 plasma cores. The authorized military response resulted in the loss of 1 fighter craft, injury to 1 pilot, and acceleration of the crisis timeline by an estimated 40 minutes. Haldeck's jaw tightened. Goran's arms dropped to his sides. Sareth was not finished. He brought up a new display. A list. 43 entries. Maintenance reports filed by Nadia Orloff over the past 2 years. Each one flagged a safety hazard. Each one included specific recommendations. 39 had been marked as reviewed and deferred. The polite way of saying ignored. 2 of these reports, Sareth said, highlighting them in red, specifically addressed the docking ring's collision protocols. They recommended updating the automated response system for uncontrolled vessel approaches. If those reports had been acted upon, the freighter situation may never have escalated to a crisis. The chamber was very quiet. Technician Orloff did not create this emergency, Sareth said. She predicted it. She was ignored. And then she solved it. Haldeck started to respond, but Sareth raised a hand. I am not finished. Before this session began, I submitted a formal proposal to the Council. I moved that humanity be granted a provisional seat on the Council of Species, and that Nadia Orloff serve as the first human representative. The chamber erupted. Voices in a dozen languages overlapped. The Malak delegates slapped their tails against their seats, which was their way of expressing outrage. 2 Drashin officers stood up. A Fenari in the back row spread her wings in agitation. Nadia just stood there. The presiding official, an ancient Fenari whose wings had turned silver with age, called for order. Then he turned to Nadia. You may speak, he said. Every eye in the chamber was on her. Compound eyes, black marble eyes, slit-pupiled, reptilian eyes. And somewhere in the back, a pair of human eyes belonging to a junior trade attaché who looked like he might faint. Nadia spoke quietly. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. She did not make grand arguments about human rights or galactic fairness. People were going to die, she said. 12,000 of them. I saw a way to stop it. So I stopped it. She paused. If it happens again, I'll do the same thing. That's all I have to say. She stopped talking. The chamber was silent. The kind of silence that happens when something true has been said so simply that there is nothing to add to it. The vote was called. Each species cast their decision. The count took several minutes. When it was finished, the presiding official read the result. The motion passed. Narrowly. 23 in favor, 19 against. The Drashin voted against it unanimously. Humanity had a seat on the council. Nadia Orloff was its representative. She walked out of the chamber on her bad leg, still wearing her stained jumpsuit, still carrying the wrench she had forgotten to take out of her pocket. In the corridor outside, Goran stepped into her path. He was a full 2 feet taller. His shadow covered her completely. He looked down at her with those slit-pupiled eyes for a long, heavy moment. Then he stepped aside. He did not speak. He did not laugh. He just moved out of her way and let her pass. It was the first time anyone on the station had ever done that. 3 months changed everything and nothing. Nadia had a council seat now. She had an office with a window that looked out into the stars. She had a title, Human Representative to the Council of Species. It sounded important. It looked important on documents. She was still terrible at politics. She could not make speeches. She stumbled over formal greetings in alien languages. She forgot diplomatic titles. She once addressed the Malek trade minister by his first name, which in Malek culture was something only your mother was allowed to do. The trade minister stared at her for 10 full seconds before bursting into the wettest, loudest laugh anyone had ever heard from a Malek. He liked her after that. What Nadia could do was solve problems. The kind of problems that had been sitting in plain sight for years while everyone argued about protocol and procedure. She linked the Malek trade databases with the Fenari diplomatic archives. Nobody had done this before because the two species had a centuries-old rivalry and refused to share information. Nadia did not ask permission. She just built the connection one night, using skills she had learned connecting incompatible maintenance systems, and presented the results at the next council session. Trade efficiency across the station increased by 30% in 2 weeks. Species started coming to her directly. A Fenari hive cluster lost the ability to communicate between its northern and southern sections. Their own engineers spent 3 weeks running diagnostics. Nadia walked into the communication hub, looked at the signal relays, and asked why they were installed upside down. The Fenari engineers stared at her. Their species did not think in terms of up and down. Their relay manufacturer did. A simple error. Nobody had caught it because nobody thought to look at it from a human perspective. She fixed it in 20 minutes that a Malek trade dispute with a smaller species called the Asori had been dragging on for 2 years. The Malek claimed the numbers were fair. The Asori claimed they were being cheated. Nadia reviewed the conversion tables used to calculate exchange rates between the two species' currencies. She found a decimal error in the third column, a tiny mistake that had been silently skimming value from every Asori transaction for over a decade. The Malek paid restitution. The Asori got a fair deal. The decimal error was fixed in an afternoon. This was the pattern. Small problems that nobody important bothered to look at, sitting under everyone's noses, waiting for someone who was used to crawling through ventilation shafts to come along and notice them. Haldeck noticed too, and he did not like it. On the 91st day of Nadia's council term, Haldeck filed a formal challenge. Under station law, any council member could be challenged to prove their worth through a trial. It was an old tradition, written when the Drashin first established the council and wanted a way to remove anyone they considered weak. The challenger could not choose the trial format. Only the one being challenged had that right. Haldeck assumed Nadia would resign rather than face a trial. Drashin trials were legendary. Kumba, endurance, feats of strength that left even their own warriors broken. Nadia did not resign. She chose a survival scenario. The rules were simple. A simulated emergency aboard the station. Power failures, hull breaches, fires, evacuations. The participant had to save as many simulated lives as possible using only the resources available on the station. No weapons, no soldiers, just brains and whatever you could find. Haldeck went first. He was efficient, disciplined. He organized military evacuations, directed emergency teams, and used Drashin tactical doctrine to prioritize sectors by strategic value. When the simulation ended, he had saved roughly 60% of the station's population. 60% was considered excellent. The Drashin in the gallery nodded with approval. Nadia went second. She did not organize evacuations. She rerouted the life support system so that breathable air flowed to the most populated areas first. She converted empty cargo bays into shelters by overriding their environmental controls. She deployed maintenance drones to seal hull breaches, something no one had ever used maintenance drones for because they were supposed to fix pipes, not save lives. She hacked the station's intercom and broadcast emergency instructions in 12 alien languages. Recordings she had made during her first week on the council sitting alone in her office at night with a translation program, just in case something like this ever happened. When the simulation ended, she had saved 94%. The gallery was silent. Even the Drashin, Haldeck sat in his chair for a long time. His scars looked deeper in the dim light of the simulation room. His hands rested on his knees. He did not move. Then he stood. He walked to where Nadia was standing. She looked up at him. He was massive, a warrior who had fought in campaigns across 3-star systems, a commander who had led armies that he asked her to teach him 0.5 words, in front of the entire gallery, in front of his own soldiers, in front of Goran, who stood in the back row with an expression that nobody could quite read. Nadia said yes. That night, alone in her office, she received a notification on her console. A deep space signal had been detected beyond the edge of map territory. It was a no-known language, but embedded in the noise was a mathematical sequence. Prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Repeating. Somebody out there was intelligent. Somebody was in trouble. And somebody was calling for help. Nadia stared at the signal for a long time. Then she started making calls. The planet was dying in slow motion. Its star, a yellow dwarf that should have had another 2 billion years of steady burning, was expanding decades ahead of schedule. Something deep inside it had gone wrong. The surface of the planet below was already baking. Rivers had dried to white scars across brown earth. Forests had become fields of charcoal. And in underground shelters carved from the bedrock, 800,000 Pelori waited to die. Nadia saw them for the first time through the viewport of the exploration vessel. Small creatures, barely 3 feet tall, thin limbs, wide dark eyes, skin that flickered with soft bioluminescent patterns of blue and gold. Their light was their language. Every pulse, every shimmer, every ripple across their skin was a word, a feeling, a name. They were beautiful, and they were terrified. The council had debated for 6 days before Nadia's small crew even reached the planet. The Drashin wanted to send warships to study the star's instability. The Fenari wanted to establish diplomatic contact and assess the situation. The Malak ran the numbers on what a rescue operation would cost and concluded it was not profitable. 3 other species agreed. The vote came back: no rescue. The cost was too high. The Pelori had no trade goods, no military value, no strategic importance. They were small and weak and had nothing to offer the galaxy. Nadia stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel and read the council's decision on her screen. Sareth stood beside her, his wings tight against his back. Haldeck stood behind them both, arms folded, his face unreadable. Durin, the Malak navigator, sat at his console, staring at his hands. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Nadia sat down at the communication terminal and started typing. Not to the council, not to the diplomats or the military or the trade unions. She sent a message to Earth. Then she sent it to every human colony, outpost, settlement, mining station, research base, and cargo ship in the sector. The message was short. It described the Pelori. It described the dying star. It described 800,000 people who would be dead in 4 months if nobody came for them. It did not ask for permission. It did not ask for funding. It asked one question: will you help? The first ship arrived in 9 days. A cargo hauler from a mining colony near the outer reach. Its captain was a woman named Rita, who had 3 crew members and a ship that rattled when it turned left. She docked with the exploration vessel and asked Nadia where to start. More came. A transport ship from the Lunas settlements. A research vessel that had been studying asteroid composition and dropped everything when the message reached them. A personal yacht owned by a retired teacher who had converted his pleasure craft into a passenger shuttle because he could not sleep knowing children were going to burn at in 6 weeks. For 112 human ships had arrived. They were not a fleet. They were not organized. They were not pretty. Some were held together with welded patches and emergency sealant. Some had crews of 2. One had a crew of 1. A teenager who had stolen her parents' shuttle and flown 11 days alone through deep space because she had read Nadia's message and decided that someone had to go. Nadia coordinated the evacuation from the exploration vessel. Every Pelori family was assigned to a ship. She kept families together. She cataloged their cultural artifacts and loaded them into climate-controlled containers. The Pelori communicated through bioluminescence, which meant they needed their glowing plants nearby to speak properly. Human botanists built makeshift greenhouses from refrigeration units and cargo crates, so the plants would survive the journey. It took 11 weeks. 11 weeks of shuttles rising from the planet's surface, carrying 40 or 50 Pelori at a time. 11 weeks of Nadia sleeping 2 hours a night, tracking every ship, every family, every fragile glowing plant. Haldeck organized a military escort with only 2 soldiers, running patrol routes around the evacuation zone to keep the ship safe. Sareth handled communication with the Pelori elders, learning their light language well enough to promise them, in their own words, that they would not be forgotten. The star grew larger every day. The sky above the planet shifted from blue to orange to a searing white that hurt to look at. Nadia was on the last ship. She stood at the viewport as the shuttle climbed through the atmosphere. Below her, the planet's surface crossed the temperature threshold. Rock melted. Soil turned to glass. The underground shelters where the Pelori had lived for generations collapsed into pools of liquid stone. Everything was gone, but 800,000 Pelori were alive. Every single one. The human fleet limped back to Orivar Station in a long, ragged line. Cargo haulers and research vessels, and one stolen shuttle piloted by a teenager who had not slept in 3 days. They entered the docking ring one at a time, slowly, carefully, carrying their passengers like something precious. The docking ring was full, not with maintenance workers or cargo handlers. With everyone. Drashan soldiers lined the walkways in full ceremonial armor. Fenari diplomats stood with their wings spread wide, which was the highest sign of respect their species could offer. Malak traders had closed their shops for the first time in station history. Species that had voted against the rescue stood shoulder to shoulder with species that had supported it. They were all silent that Nadia's ship docked last. The airlock opened. She stepped out into the corridor, small and limping and so exhausted that her vision blurred at the edges. Her jumpsuit was stained. Her hair was unwashed. She looked exactly like what she was. A maintenance worker who had not rested in 11 weeks. Goran was waiting that he stood directly in front of her. 7 feet of scaled muscle and warrior training. The cadet who had laughed at her crawling out of a ventilation shaft a lifetime ago. He dropped to one knee. Not a mockery. In the Drashan tradition of honoring someone whose courage exceeded your own. A tradition reserved for the greatest warriors in their history. Behind him, one by one, every Drashan on the station knelt. Haldeck was the last. He lowered himself slowly, his old scars stretching, his knees hitting the metal floor with a sound that echoed through the silent corridor. He looked up at Nadia. "My people have legends," he said. "Warriors who conquered worlds. Generals who broke armies. Kings who made empires kneel." He paused. "None of them will be remembered the way this will be. The galaxy will forget the strong, but it will never forget the girl who carried 800,000 lives because no one else would." Nadia looked at him. She looked at the rows of kneeling warriors and standing diplomats and silent traders. She looked at the Pelori families being guided gently out of the ships behind her, their skin glowing soft blue and gold in the station's light. She did not know what to say. She never did that. She nodded. She stepped past the kneeling legends, and she went to check on the Pelori families being assigned temporary housing. She had work to do, share.